All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. I still see some people coming in, so we'll kind of give that a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself and everybody today. So thanks everyone for joining. My name is Madison. On behalf of Carasoft Technology Corporation, I would like to welcome you to our MarkLogic webinar, Solving the Child Welfare Data Sharing Problem. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. The audio portion of this webcast can be heard through your computer speakers, and please note all participants on the line have been muted to reduce any background noise. If you would like to ask a question throughout the presentation, please feel free to do so using the Q&A pod on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. We will set aside time at the end of this presentation to host this Q&A, and our speakers today will be able to answer any questions you may have. If we are unable to get to your question today, our MarkLogic team at Carasoft will follow up with you offline, and this webinar is being recorded, so a link will be sent in a follow-up email if you would like to view this again or share with a fellow colleague. To tell you a little bit about Carasoft, we are a trusted government IT solutions provider delivering software and support solutions to federal, state, local, and education customers. Carasoft maintains dedicated teams to support sales and marketing for all of its vendors. Our contact information will be at the end of this presentation, so please don't hesitate to call or email us with any of your needs or questions. And again, this is being recorded, so a follow-up email will be sent to you all with this archived link. We are offering 1 CPE credit to those who attend today's webinar. So in order to fully qualify for this credit, you must be actively listening as well as answering all polling questions that will be presented. And if you meet all of these requirements, you will receive your certificate within 2 weeks. All right, so to go ahead and introduce today's speakers, we have Carol Hussey. She is the moderator and president of Evolve Strategy Group. Laura Miles, Director, State and Local Director for the WRMA Incorporated Company. Neil Ramgalam, he is the Senior Account Executive for MarkLogic, and Gary Katz, the Solutions Director for MarkLogic. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our first speaker today, and that's Carol Hussey.
Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're very excited to be here and talk about the really important topic of data in child welfare. As Madison mentioned, I am with Evolve Strategy Group, and I'll be facilitating today. So I'll be scattering some of your survey questions, the polling questions throughout, and look forward to some engagement at the end. But just to set a little bit of context for today, one of the most important things needed to support child welfare practice and program is data. And that's not just data in your SACWIS or CCWIS system, but it's also data from other governmental programs as well, like SNAP and TANF, Medicaid, and child support, as well as community services. And as we continue to focus on getting further upstream with prevention and some of the aspects of Family First Prevention Services Act, the need for additional data across programs becomes even more important. The ability to quickly have a holistic view of a person, their case records, their service history, other external factors, leads to better decisions and better outcomes. So today you're going to be hearing about a data-first strategy that can help agencies leverage a variety of data sources across programs and external entities to equip caseworkers in making the right decisions. The spirit of CCWIS was founded on the quality data to inform case practice. Wherever you are in your modernization journey, I know we have some folks with us today who are already down a path of CCWIS, others who haven't yet started. But regardless, you're going to hear today about how MarkLogic's solution can provide real-time results and long-term components of that modernization strategy. We do have a great panel lined up for you today. As Madison pointed out, we have Laura Miles. She's a veteran in public services. We're so honored to have her here with us today. And Laura is a director with WRMA. She's going to talk to us about the business aspects of why data is so important to child welfare practice and programs. Then we'll hear from Neil. And Neil will transition us kind of from that business perspective over into the technical and how the MarkLogic solution works. And then Gary will follow it up with a demo of the product, and you'll get to see a peek under the hood of what the MarkLogic solution looks like. So we're really excited to dive in this morning with, this afternoon for some of us, with this presentation. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton to Laura, and she can talk to us about the business.
Good afternoon, everyone. As a former child welfare director, I wanted to provide you with some of my observations and experiences that highlight how valuable data was in my work overseeing a state-administered child welfare system. First, at the broadest level, child welfare data can help the statewide system to define its most pressing citizen service needs, and then using that information to set future direction to meet those needs. This can be as basic as knowing the number of persons served, which translates into the number of cases, and having sufficient staffing to respond to the volume. Data can also support having the right level of services for the children and families in the immediate proximity of the children and families you serve. Using data to help tell your story about your most pressing needs in child welfare helps others to better understand what is happening with facts. I have used data to help with pursuit of new and revised laws, in seeking annual and special budgetary requests, to help create the rationale for memoranda of understanding with partners, and aiding the development of new and enhanced services to meet specific child and family needs. One example I wanted to highlight here relates to an overall shortage of foster families to serve the total number of foster children, as well as those who could provide services to those children with higher level of care needs. Data was pulled and showed that we needed to provide more specialized and treatment care levels for children and youth. We had in our system 5 levels of care, one level which was assigned to the child and another level that was assigned to the foster family for foster care placement matching purposes. We were able to show foster children's levels of care, how these map directly to the available foster families and other placement settings in our continuum, and to define where the gaps in service levels were in our continuum. We were able to use that data to tell our story with legislative and fiscal personnel, and to market and recruit for additional foster families to meet the demands of the foster children needing higher levels of care. Better understanding of the challenges children and families face. Data and information helps tell the child and family story, their history, their needs, and informs your efforts about whether progress is being made with individual and family case and service plan goals. As agencies collaborate with children and families, shared data can allow you to provide an integrated understanding of the challenges and to help align approaches and services. Providing a more holistic perspective. Sharing information with supporting agencies and providers enables a more holistic view of the child and family. This includes interfaces with law enforcement, courts, hospitals, the education system, TANF, SNAP, Medicaid, and many other social service agencies. Child welfare connects with so many other helping systems that it needs the benefits of data integration whenever possible to have a complete picture. Quite frankly, children and families are better served and supported when we have access to all of the critical information. This helps frontline workers to make informed and person-centered care decisions. Now, we all know the downsides in child welfare of not having the 360-degree view of the person. This can include duplication of services, missed services, a person having to tell their story countless times across the system, and sometimes negative impacts and consequences. At times, it is only when you are completing a holistic retrospective case review or when a significant event occurs that you realize that someone in the child and family serving system had information that could have helped to inform and make better decisions. I decided here to use an example that is an analogy aimed at illustrating the benefits of having all the information and the consequences of not having it. It occurred to me as I was preparing my remarks for this webinar about my receipt of personal medical care through my HMO plan. It's kind of parallels with what happens in child welfare. I have a designated primary physician who manages my care. My primary doctor is in charge of my holistic medical needs, but often must refer me to specialists to meet specific and unique needs. As you know from experience, it works well when the primary doctor has access to all the data and information from the specialist to make next step decisions about your health, your well-being, and your care. You as a patient feel supported when you know the team is working together and holistically on your behalf. Conversely, we all know how the story goes when the primary doctor and the specialists are not sharing data and information at all, or maybe minimally, about your care. You may get the wrong care, be referred to the same service that didn't help you before. Your care may take longer. You have to repeat your medical background over and over again, and positive outcomes may take longer to achieve, or quite frankly, you may get worse while the system is trying to pull it together on your behalf. Child welfare serves as the primary care for many children and families in crisis, and the staff that serve them need holistic data and information across the health and human services system continuum to create those positive outcomes every time there is a cross-agency intersect. Next, data and information can aid the child and worker safety. Having a well-rounded view of the child and family allows the responding workers to prepare in advance for any previously recorded home safety issues, medical conditions, dangerous persons, known address or neighborhood-specific issues that they need to be aware of, guns in the home, threatening animals, and the list goes on. Sometimes those alerts are in the child welfare system. Sometimes those alerts are in other data systems that the child welfare worker needs to know about. Responding workers need to have the benefit of and access to all known information to assist with their responses in the field. Data shows services that produce positive outcomes. Being able to call the data to determine the service delivery interventions that produce positive outcomes is extremely beneficial. Having reliable and consistent data enables analysis of what works and doesn't work, services that were effective and those that weren't. This means having access to other data and information about services the child and family are receiving and that work. With, for example, predictive analytics, you bring past services that are in place for a period of time and evaluate the value of taking on additional services and getting in front of those services that children and families will benefit from. This can save time and cost. Data offers cues for service level improvements. For example, you may have long-standing services that are routinely used for children and parents who are the subject of substantiated child abuse and neglect complaints. However, based upon data and information, you discover that the children and families included in some of these services are not getting better and lack positive outcomes. This requires you delve in deeper about the service's quality to determine its use in meeting the intended needs. Perhaps changes need to be made to address service improvements by executing contractual changes to include expected performance outcomes, setting different requirements for the staffing, providing those services, such as training or performance plan expectations, or another action. So one example that I wanted to highlight and share, I had experience with the heavy use of parenting classes for families with open child welfare cases requiring ongoing services. We noticed through data analysis that some specific parenting class providers produced better outcomes than others based on length of stay, return to service, and other data points. A deeper dive into the contract for the agency that did not produce the best results included some or all of the changes that I mentioned previously: contract performance, outcomes, expectations being included in their contract, additional staff training, adding performance expectations, performance plans, and also frequent contract monitoring and documentation with the parties being provided with an alert about the potential for them not continuing this service if improvements did not occur on behalf of children and families. So now let me move on to the challenges with data and child welfare. Thank you, Gary, for showing the second part of this slide. While all states are responsible for compliance with federal, state, and other local requirements, each child welfare agency is structured differently. There are also many differences in the way services are operated and delivered across the nation. For example, 9 states are county administered. This presents unique challenges for them. 2 states are considered hybrid, and the remaining are state administered. But sometimes even in state administered states, like the one I worked in, different practices can occur depending on your location. By sharing the available data, you are able to look at a common data set, even as the families move across your state to various locations. From experience, no matter the administrative child welfare structure, data challenges exist, and I wanted to highlight some of the ones that I noticed from my experience. Challenge, if you have lack data governance and support, not having the executive level invested, supporting and setting the strategic data and information technology goals and direction can prove most challenging for cross-agency data sharing among the Title IV-E and interagency partners. While grassroots efforts and a bottoms-up approach can gain traction and the attention of leadership, but having a champion, data champion, who can help you with your initiatives can make incredible inroads. They can help overcome barriers and obstacles that require state legislative, budgetary, policy, and other strategic direction setting. So I was a direct eyewitness to a state CIO who was, on a positive side, was more than involved as an executive sponsor on a child welfare information system project, not just a name and a title. In fact, this individual was a staunch champion of child welfare data and information technology changes at the state level and was an issue resolver and a barrier buster within the child welfare agency and across agencies, since this individual had influence for all state agencies in the IT arena, and they helped us along our journey. Next, aligning laws, policies, and gaining mutual understanding. Breaking down the silos and working with other health and human services entities with differing federal guidance, state laws, and policies is not always easy. Take it from me. Quite frankly, we sometimes speak different languages with our acronyms alone. It can take time to gain a better understanding of each other's objectives, overarching laws and policies before you can even begin solving your data and information needs. From experience, one example stands out in my mind. It includes the integration of child welfare with children's mental and behavioral health services. We all know there are data and information protections in place in child welfare and with all the other intersecting services and partners, law enforcement, criminal, education, FERPA, mental, behavioral, and medical, PHI and HIPAA, child welfare, CAPTA, the reporter, and others, child protection registry, and just many other confidentiality and release protections. While we're all guided by HIPAA, the integration of child welfare and children's mental and behavioral health data within an enterprise statewide automated child welfare information system led to many meetings, discussions, and multiple legal reviews about who was the HIPAA covered entity, even with the 2 entities being within the same state cabinet agency. We did ultimately share and exchange data and information about children, but it took time to overcome this issue in particular. We ended up focusing on the need to know, system redaction capabilities, records release details, and having a designated HIPAA point spokesperson for the agency. And that's just one example. Transformations take time and steady efforts by all. If you have been a part of a data or information system transformation, or even a small system improvement, you have top of mind examples of the challenges you faced along the way. Your transformation efforts were not a straight line effort to the finish line. Transformations are challenging, but in the end, worth the effort. You do not always realize it when you're in it, but instead after you have achieved it and you have the opportunity to complete a retrospective. From experience and working on an integrated child welfare system, we were not able to integrate the data for all targeted partners. For example, we had one partner agency that could not meet our project's timeline as they were embarking on information system reforms themselves and had to secure different federal funding and approval than us. They had to remain focused on their project's progress and did not have the resources to assist us. But we did not give up and had a plan of action to continue making improvements when the timing was right. Outcomes-based metrics differences across systems. While there are outcomes differences, there is also common ground that can be found in order to align the data, the information, and the work across systems. The Child and Family Services Review outcomes provided a great framework from which to start discussions with other agencies about the leveling of our different data sets, information, and outcomes, safety, permanency, and well-being. We would routinely share the specific outcomes and our performance against them to gain support from others on our journey of an integrated child welfare information system. Data quality. Data quality is a challenge facing child welfare agencies and its supporting systems. Child welfare agencies require vast and varied data and information, mandatory fields and entries by staff to comply with state, federal, and other requirements. Despite the best training and information system rules and prompts, if data is not required, it may not be completed or addressed timely and accurately, not to mention agencies being shorthanded. This can cause rippling effects like a data conversion for a new system, or when you are making efforts to exchange data with a partner agency. I was involved with data conversion in a SACWIS replacement project, and the entire project required time and attention with filling in the missing data pieces and correcting data entry errors, whether it be through manual cleanup or using automated ways to improve the data quality, to be able to move forward in exchanging data with partners. Interagency collaboration requires ongoing commitment. I've touched on this a little bit, but the interagency cross-systems collaboration can prove challenging. From experience, the development and execution of information data exchanges by each participating agency or provider takes time and ongoing commitment by staff, with each agency needing to make sure that its data is cleansed, prepared, tested, and executed well. Resource challenges and staffing issues can also produce obstacles that need to be overcome when executing these bidirectional data integration and exchanges. Significance and urgency misalignment by each participating party involved with bidirectional data integration. It's not always aligned. This can take time and having the right staff at the table to help influence the importance and a sense of urgency of the need to exchange data. For example, our project had time sprints with specific work that needed to be accomplished within a set interval. The partner agency personnel, in some instances that were working with us on data exchange details, did not always appreciate these time frames and our sense of urgency. In some cases, it required escalation to achieve alignment across agencies. So these are just a few examples of the value of data and the challenges from my experience. I want to thank you for your time and attention today. I hope my experiences offered you some helpful insights. I will now turn it over to Carol, who will set the stage for our next speaker.
Thank you very much, Laura. Appreciate all of that. So hopefully you can understand now how important data is to child welfare and that prevention and getting upstream and cross-program collaboration. So we'll begin with our first survey question of the day. If you look at the Q&A option there at the bottom of your screen, the polling question is going to pop up there. And this is for those folks who want CEU credit today, but of course we'd welcome anyone to respond to this question. And we'll start off with what are the 3 examples of the value of data in child welfare? Defining most pressing needs, providing a more holistic perspective, increasing preparation time for visits, and offering cues for service level improvements. And this is multiple choice, but you can choose more than one option there. Take a look at that. I'll give you just a moment. Okay. So what we're going to have next is Neil is going to come up next, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about MarkLogic solution.
Great. Well, thank you, Carol, and hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you this afternoon on this very important topic of data in child welfare. As you heard from Laura, the data sharing problem is certainly a challenge. It can be a real barrier to efficiencies in the child welfare practice. But the good news is that there is a much simplified approach that allows for more rapid implementation with greatly reduced risk. Excuse me. Today, we'd like to share with you some information on our enabling solution and our approach to the problem, something we call the MarkLogic Data Hub for Child Welfare. The MarkLogic Data Hub platform is the simplest way to share and integrate data from the silos. So why take a data-first approach? Whether you're moving into CCWIS in the short term, the long term, or perhaps staying with your SACWIS system, child welfare practices are challenged with the lack of data required to complete the complete story of the child and the family in the eyes of the caseworker. A data-first approach can help address this today, even before modernization, or as a means to enhance the modernization that you're doing with your future or current CCWIS implementation. You know, some practices are moving to a person-centered approach for providing care. This holistic approach that Laura talked about can provide better insights to help achieve outcomes. However, to realize this, a complete 360-degree view of the child and family across programs is really required. This means that the data silos need to be overcome and data must be shared. And lastly, CCWIS regulations have defined parameters for data, things such as quality, timeliness, security, and so forth. But really, these are not only requirements for CCWIS. Even if you're not going to CCWIS, these are requirements of data in any child welfare practice today. Next. So MarkLogic creates value from complex data. I think that's a good summary for what MarkLogic is really all about. Firstly, use any source. So in order to enable caseworkers that 360-degree view of their client, MarkLogic quickly and easily ingests data from any source and in any format, such as data from the various program areas, Medicaid, TANF, SNAP, child support, CWCAs, and external data sources as well. And then we quickly discover the connections in the data. We enable you to discover useful connections across this data that's now harmonized in our data hub by providing an enterprise Ask Anything type of search that seamlessly spans across this enterprise data. So we're not just giving you your own copy of the data silos, but are providing you with the entity relationships that exists of the person or the family in this unified data that you now have. You'll see a demonstration of this later when Gary gives us a peek under the covers, and I think that will make a lot more sense. Finally, we provide speed of time to value. With this complex data, whether it's search or query, rapidly enabling new or existing applications to take advantage of this harmonized data, or perhaps to enrich your analytics and reporting to obtain deeper insights into cases that can enable more effective decision-making. So let's take a closer look at the MarkLogic Data Hub. Next. So as you'll notice, this is not a technical diagram. So even though we're talking about a technology, we're not doing a deep tech dive today. So I'll say that up front. I'm happy to follow up with that if you're interested in doing that. This is more of a logical view of what is going on in the MarkLogic Data Hub. And the key message here you should get is that it is by far the simplest way to integrate data from those silos that you need in your practice. And you can see some of the program areas that are listed here. So firstly, get data in. We load the data as is from other program areas, external sources, or in whatever format it exists, structured or unstructured. Data ingestion is immediate from the silos in other program areas. And our projects have actually proven our ability to rapidly deploy. Typically, we're deploying 4 times faster than what other approaches have delivered or what the customer expectation was. So something we're very pleased about. So we avoid having to model the data up front, and we avoid the brittle integration connection points that tend to break every time something changes. So we have the ability to adapt to changes in the data. We get the data right. So the key here is the MarkLogic unified platform. So instead of stitching together a large number of separate data management products, everything is already unified in a single platform, providing that real-time 360-degree view of the data. And again, I'll leave it to Gary to get a little bit more into the details on that. Smart curation. We provide automation. So instead of worrying about mapping data schemas together, integrating a master data management tool and so forth, you can leverage the built-in smart and automated capabilities to enrich, harmonize, and master data easier and faster. And from that, we create what we call a golden record or a master record of the person from all this data. So if you can think of all the program areas that you could be ingesting data from, and the fact that a person could exist across all that, you can realize how much duplication in the data could exist. So we deal with that challenge as part of the unified platform. And then finally, with notification and alerting, MarkLogic can monitor the data and changes in the data, and we can do things like automatically send caseworkers notifications based on alerts on events that may be putting the child or the family at risk. So all built into the unified platform. And last but not least, to get the data out, one of the first things to think about when sharing or exposing data is security. MarkLogic's advanced security manages the roles, permissions, privileges at a very granular level in the data. And instead of worrying about whether to lock data up or risk sharing it, you have that extremely granular tight control over exactly what data gets shared and with whom. So this should help provide confidence with your data sharing partner. And this includes things that Laura mentioned, such as data redaction. So we're just talking about this at a high level for now. So how do you use the curated and harmonized data you now have? Data from MarkLogic may be easily output to existing or new applications with relative ease. Additionally, once access is provided, analytics and reporting are now significantly enhanced by the ability to provide deeper insights from this unified data that tells a complete story of the child and the family. Next. So we have a couple of case studies. In the interest of time, I'm just going to really briefly go through these. I think you have some of the key points on the slides. But the first one is a state Medicaid agency in the Southeast US. State policy says they can't allow us to use their name or logo, but they are real. And they were having a challenge with their caseworkers, having to log on to multiple systems to get that complete view of the data. Log into the claim system, the member system, eligibility, and provider system. And, very inefficient and really costly and just really cumbersome for the agency. So they attempted to solve the problem. They realized it would take 2 or more years to complete, and then they realized they couldn't complete it. Brought in MarkLogic, and our team stood up the MarkLogic Data Hub in 120 days. And that was for the first release into production. And then subsequently, in the next 30 days, ingested an additional, I think it was 6 to 8 different additional silos, data silos that would actually provide that complete view that the caseworkers and the business was looking for. So it's a great story that we'd like to tell. and is bringing significant cost savings to the agency. Next. So the next one, you're probably all familiar with the Affordable Care Act. Healthcare.gov was a portal that CMS was mandated to implement. There was a deadline when the Affordable Care Act first came into being, and they also realized they had some significant challenges. How do you bring all the data from multiple federal agencies, all the states across the US, multiple plan providers, when upfront you don't know the data, types of data and the models that you're dealing with? And it really required an agile type of solution to implement this, and one that could scale. So MarkLogic worked with healthcare.gov, stood up the data management infrastructure for this in 18 months. And pleased to say that we have been their partner and the data management infrastructure for over the past 8 open enrollments. And you can see some of the statistics there. It's quite a highly scalable environment that we've implemented there. So something we're proud of. So Carol, back to you.
Thank you, Neil. That 18 months is pretty impressive, I must say. Survey question, polling question number 2. We could bring that up, please. So how does a data-first approach enhance interoperability to improve outcomes? We have increased frequency of data, increasing the amount of data, enabling a person-centered approach, or providing a role for a data analyst. I'll give you a few moments to answer that question for CEU credits or just for fun. Okay, next up, we're going to roll over to Gary, and he's going to show us a demo of the MarkLogic solution.
Thank you, Carol. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gary Katz. I'm Solution Director with MarkLogic. Before we jump into the demo, we've heard from Neil, what does the Data Hub approach provide? Well, let's talk about what you would do for a moment if you didn't have the Data Hub approach. Like, what do people typically do? What does this look like? If you want to consolidate or put together a system that does all of the different things that the Data Hub does, you would need to stitch together a multitude of different tools in order to get the job done. Now, by way of storytelling, this was my second time at MarkLogic. And in between my times at MarkLogic, I was the CTO for a large upper right-hand quadrant Gartner leading data integration company. And they had capabilities that checked all of these different boxes for the most part. But when we would go to actually put this into implementation for a customer, it required a tremendous amount of effort in order to get this done. You would wait anywhere between 12 and 18 months to get to an initial operating capability, which is to say you wouldn't have anything to use for a year or year and a half, versus per se what we did in a Southeast state, where we were able to get to an initial operating capability with a multitude of data sources in 120 days, and then 30 days subsequent, we were able to add in more data sources beyond that. So the challenge here is that when you've got all these different tools to work together, you don't have a data integration task, you have a systems integration task. And there's a big difference there, because all of those different systems pieces work with the data, but they're all disjointed. They have different skill sets. They require different contracts. Even if they're under the same corporate umbrella, they're different code bases. So a hotfix for one product, for instance, or an upgrade, can adversely affect another product that's in there. And then you got to pull it out, and you've got this balancing act that you're performing. You really need a surgeon's touch before you make a change there, because you could adversely have an impact downstream. This is a very brittle architecture and very rigid. I like to call them Franken architectures. We sort of patch and stitch all these things together. And this is where the Data Hub approach is significantly different. What MarkLogic provides isn't 20 different products underneath one hood. It's one product. It's our Data Hub. that has all of these different components that are very tightly coupled together in one offering with all of the enterprise capabilities that customers need in order to rely on us, such as high availability and disaster recovery, government grade security, the ability to scale at tremendous volumes of data, and most importantly, not beyond the enterprise capabilities, is the ability to make sense of the data very, very quickly so that you can start acting on the mission as opposed to putting your investment in trying to build this Uber system that hopefully will meet the needs that you'd set for it 18 months ago, to say nothing of the changes that may have occurred between when you started the project and when it's finally into an initial operating capability. And you have new requirements, changed requirements, different data sets, changed data sets that now you need to go back and accommodate. So that's why it's a bit of a self-defeating process in the legacy approach to it, and why what MarkLogic's Data Hub provides really expedites the amount of time between when you start and time to mission, time to benefit. So we have, and this is the I guess the last slide before the demo. We cater to enterprise customers, right? People with mission critical applications. We don't see MarkLogic catering to the next new, app that's, kids are going to play with on their phones. We see MarkLogic being used when it's a matter of life and death, when it's a matter of national security and intelligence, when it's about making trades, in financial systems, when it's about getting people health insurance through healthcare.gov. We deal overwhelmingly with enterprise mission critical clients who rely on us to get the job done. That's our primary market. So with that, let me jump into the demo here. And let me just set the stage. This is not going to be a technical demonstration. But I am going to show just a very, very small peek under the hood so that you can get an idea of how quickly and easily you can get data into MarkLogic and start making sense of it right away. So what we're doing is we're loading some cross-program data. So I've got some Medicaid data, some child welfare data, and some public safety data. We're going to throw this into the Data Hub for Child Welfare. And we're going to see how that data can be quickly ingested, curated, how we can help to improve upon that data a bit, show the linkages between it, and discover data within there. But most importantly, getting the data right is helpful, getting it in, getting it right. But most importantly, we want to get the data out and start using it in applications that business analysts and the caseworkers and that management can use to start making sense of that data. So with that, well, just kidding, not survey question 3. Let me, whoops, those are my children. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, so what we have here, we're looking at MarkLogic's what we call Data Hub Central. And I'm just going to click play here so we can actually look. We're exploring what we call different flows of data, right? And these are all different components of the child welfare data set that we have. We have other data sets in here as well, right? So these are representing a child welfare system, by the way, where we modeled this work after work that we had done in another state. Everything that we're seeing here is fake. There's no real data in here whatsoever. But these are all different data sets that we're just loading into MarkLogic. We also are loading in some other data sets for Medicaid. We've got some Medicaid member data. We have some claims data that we're also going to be looking at as well. So we've got some Medicaid claims that we can put in. And now, after loading the data into MarkLogic, and I'm going to pause here, well, just a half a second right there. Went by too quickly for me. Okay, I'll just let it go. We can start looking at the data exactly as is. Really, we load the data in and we can immediately see the connections between the different data sets that we brought in. MarkLogic basically has said, we're going to load in all these different data sets, and we're going to start looking at the different entities, the children, the claims, the cases that are associated with them, all together in one view. So knowing not much more than the business environment itself, we start enabling ourselves to look through. Now we can search for a particular person. In this case, we're looking for someone named Drindy. I want to note a very small distinction. There are two graphs here. There's a big graph over here on the right, and then there's a little graph over here on the left. And these are because that's overwhelmingly our Medicaid data versus our child welfare data. So as we look at these different data sets, right, all in one view, we're going to see that we have what appears to be duplicate data, right? We have Drindy spelled with an I over here. We can open up and see here's Drindy Day, spelled with an I. We have another Drindy down below spelled with a Y. We have another Drindy where the first name and the last name are changed. By the way, these are common data operations that your teams would need to clean up, right? And then on the other side, we've got, Drindy and her relationships to Nuno Jr. and Nuno Sr. in the child welfare data. So unto itself, if we were to go and start trying to work on this data, we'd be dealing in lots of different Drindys and lots of different Nunos. We're not getting a very clear view of this. Instead, we have ways that we can improve upon the data from when it's loaded into MarkLogic by using something that we call mastering that allows for us to take identity information and sync it up and say, is this all one Drindy or are these actually two different people? And we look at things like address data and we look at name data and birth date data in order to figure that out, so that now when we search on Drindy, we've just run that mastering routine in the background. Now we're getting one Drindy and one Nuno Jr. and one Nuno Sr. And we're seeing a much better connection here between the Medicaid data and the child welfare data. But when we click on them, you can still see that all that original data is still there. We're noting that we merged them together and that they come from different systems. We're not changing the data. We always have the authoritative data, but now we've got that curated version of the data, that enhanced quality data that is of better value to the mission, that can be searched on and made accessible for downstream consumption. Moreover, we're looking at some of the child welfare data. We can see some of the relationships between the cases about who the care providers are, who are, how many investigations are there, how many episodes are there in these different cases, what type of allegations are being made. Do we have people who are, living in the same home who may be connected to the abuse allegation? So we want to be able to draw these connections quickly within the data with very little effort, so that suddenly we can start making this accessible downstream into more of a reporting framework. And that's what we're going to be doing next here. So click on a couple more relationships, and then we are going to move quickly into the business view, which is really what we care about here. So I'm going to jump into okay, so now what we're looking at here is a business intelligence reporting tool called Tableau. This is very common. Folks have this, and they draw reports on it. MarkLogic actually directly plugs into Tableau, as well as many other business intelligence tools. And we're looking at the data on the left-hand side, straight from MarkLogic, no different than any other, data source to Tableau. So now, because we've enhanced the data, and we've actually deduplicated that data and we've consolidated it, we can start drawing reports on that high fidelity data. So we can start seeing, episode timelines for a particular case. We can start looking at visitation timelines and the types of visitations. We can look at the case assignments, by caseworker. We can even look at, management views to see what is the caseload for particular case workers, which is what we're seeing on the right-hand side of this particular chart. Now recall that I also mentioned that we've loaded in some public safety data. We had that actually inside of our child welfare flow. What we're looking at here is a report about child placements and the sex offender registry. And this report is running a proximity alert report saying when we have a child who is less than a mile from the workplace or residence of a sex offender, we want to have a notification sent. The reason for this is that you may place a child in a safe location, but the sex offender may come in later because they changed their work address after the fact, or they went, the child, gets put into a home and suddenly, someone has a new boyfriend who is now on the list. You need to suddenly be alerted to this, and you need to get this in real time, as opposed to trying to correlate this across these separate systems. By putting them into a data hub approach where you can look at cross-program data, you can start to interrogate the data much more efficiently. So this is the view within Tableau of sex offender data. And also recall that we have some Medicaid data in here as well. So we can run a completely different report on the same data set, the same data hub data that has the cross-program data, looking at claims data by zip code over time. We can look at diagnosis descriptions in particular geographies. There's all different kinds of analytics you can glean from this by having the availability of higher fidelity data across the different domains, but knowing that you can do so safely and securely. So with that, I am going to toss back to Carol.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, we have one final poll question, and then we'll move into some questions and answers. There you go. You should see that. What does the Ask Anything Universal Index allow for? Cloud deployment, system modernization, index once and query endlessly, or data standards? We'll give you just a moment there. Okay. We do have already a few questions in the Q&A module below. If somebody has questions and you would like to add them, please feel free to add them in that area. Our first question is, in the instance of multiple customer data sources, the assumption is that the connections will be in the context of each data source. If there are multiple data sources, is the assumption that the connections between data across multiple sources will be a manual effort? That might be for you, Gary.
Yes, that is definitely for me. So that's a great question. Most frequently, we find first, there's usually MOUs of, how you can share that data across, different programs, what exactly it is that you're sharing. Now, practically speaking, from a technology standpoint, it can be done any which way. We can take data live as it becomes available, because ultimately the data can be pushed into MarkLogic, and that's fine. But practically speaking, we find in our programs that data sharing tends to happen in batch modes, right? Where we'll get like a nightly dump or, of the updated data that gets pushed into the data hub. So that really is more of a policy decision, more so than a technical limitation. We have other systems that we've worked with where we have direct connections that are actually, grabbing data from the source systems and pumping it into MarkLogic as those changes are made. So it's not so much of a technical question, so much as really what is our permission to the authoritative data before it comes into MarkLogic, and what level of access is being provided by that data owner.
Excellent. Hope that answered your question. If you have a follow-on question, do feel free to add that into the Q&A section of your interface. Okay, any other questions coming in? I have one here for Laura. Do you have an example of a data integration challenge that you faced and the ways that you were able to break down those data silos? You're on mute, Laura.
Unmute. Sorry about that. Thank you for the question. Data exchanges, as I talked about, are tricky. We had to make sure we had, as Gary just mentioned, it's helpful to have the memoranda of understanding, the agreements in place well before you're intending to data exchange, making sure you have the right staff at the table who can move forward the data exchange, the details, the technical details, and should they need business, be able to bring the business parties into the discussion as needed. And as I said in my remarks, sometimes these things are painstaking and take a lot of time. You have to have folks that are willing to just kind of stay the course, continue making slow and steady progress, making sure they have resources to go to if they run into obstacles and barriers that the team can help them overcome. That's really helpful, whether it be their local manager, the project manager, the executive product owner on the project, but somebody that can help them overcome any obstacles they face and be willing to roll up the sleeves and help. Hope that answers your question.
Great advice, Laura. Thank you so much. And with that, I am going to hand the mic back to Madison from Carasoft, who's going to close us out for today. So thank you everyone for coming. We really appreciate your time. Madison?
All right. Can everyone see my screen here?
Sure can.
Perfect. All right. Well, I want to give a special thanks to Carol, Gary, Laura, and Neil for being with us this afternoon. And I also want to thank all of our participants who joined today. We hope that this webinar has been helpful to you all and your organization. If you have any follow-up questions or would like to request more information, please feel free to contact us via the information on this slide here. Again, if you meet all of the requirements for the CPE credits, you will receive that certificate within 2 weeks. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.